welcome everybody. You are attending this evening Ruin, Repair and Renewal. So I hope that's what you're here to see. My name is Fran and I'm the volunteer officer at the Courtauld. It's my absolute pleasure to be introducing our Conway Storytellers, who will be sharing their stories with you this evening. All of our storytellers are volunteers, and for some of them, this is their first public event. So please do give them a really warm welcome. This evening, our storytellers are Gill Stoker, Alice Nelson, Christopher Williams, and Dora Williams. We'll hear each story in turn, and then we will be showing a film made by other volunteers just before the pandemic hit, and we're really pleased to be showing that today. And afterwards, there'll be plenty of time for a Q&A. So throughout the event, please do feel free to use the chat box and drop any comments, responses, and questions. The event is being recorded today, so you will get the chance to rewatch it or send it to family and friends for them to enjoy. During this event, your microphone and your camera is going to be turned off, and it's being managed by our technical team, so don't worry about being seen or heard. This evening is part of the Being Human Festival, and I saw that some people in the chat have been to other Being Human Festival events. There's a lot going on. It's a national festival of the humanities taking place between the 11th and the 20th of November this year. Being Human is the only national festival of the humanities, and it's run by the School of Advanced Study, the University of London, and a partnership with the Arts and Humanities Research Council and the British Academy. There are lots of events taking place in person and online. So check out the full programme at beinghumanfestival.org. You can also find at Being Human Fest on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So do feel free to tweet about this event and share any screenshots. And the hashtag is BeingHuman2021. To help keep the festival free, please, we'd really love it if you could share your feedback at the end of the event. So when the event finishes today, I'll be sending a survey, and if you can let the festival know what you thought about the event, it helps to keep it free and improve it for everybody in the future. So I wanted to introduce you to just some of the other volunteers who are taking part in this huge digitisation project at the Courtauld. So I'm joining you at the moment from the Conway Library, which is in the basement of Somerset House on the Strand. And this photograph here, taken in the before times, just shows some of the people that have helped to make our huge digitisation project possible. So since 2017, over 1,000 people have come through our doors and been involved in digitisation. The Conway Library itself is a collection of 1.5 million photographs, mostly of art and architecture. They're all arranged into these red boxes, some of which you can see on the screen. And volunteers are doing everything to bring these photographs to the world for free. So everything needs to be accessioned, numbered, sorted, photographed, and we're also capturing all kinds of metadata information which will make the collection searchable for the first time. This photograph is also taken in the before times. You can see Becca, Julia and Ray in our digitisation vault, busy taking snaps, which will eventually be available for anybody to use for free at super high resolution. And our volunteers come from all walks of life, and we have no minimum pre-existing skills or time commitment requirements or knowledge requirements. So if you feel inspired to kind of be involved with volunteering after today's event, we'll also send you information about that after we finish this evening. Okay. But let's get to the storytelling, which everybody is here for. So I'm going to introduce each storyteller as we go along, and please leave your questions or comments in the chat. After the stories, we'll have our short film, and after that, we'll have the Q&A and respond to comments and questions. So our first storyteller this evening is Gill Stoker. Gill has lived, studied and worked in London since the mid-1970s. She studied at Birkbeck and at KCL, King's College, just next door, and she taught at the Open University's London region for over 21 years. She started volunteering with us during lockdown in May 2020. So over to you, Gill.
Thank you, Fran, and hello, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm just waiting for our picture. Here we are. So this photo is of the Gaiety Theater on the corner of the Aldwych and the Strand in central London, more or less opposite Somerset House and the Courtauld. This building opened in 1903, and this photo was taken 2 years later. And if we look closely at the traffic, you can see a mixture of horse-drawn and motor transport on the road that fits in with the kind of 1905 date. So this theatre replaced an earlier Gaiety Theatre building on a nearby site where popular musical comedies or burlesques were performed in the 1890s with elegant female dancers known as Gaiety Girls. And when this new theatre opened in 1903, that style of production continued. Some of the Gaiety Girls became actresses, such as Emmeline Terrace, Cicely Courtnidge, Gladys Cooper, Evelyn Leigh. And another one, Mabel Russell, later known as Mabel Phillipson, became an MP. Many of them married into the aristocracy. Their rich suitors were nicknamed stage door Johnnies as they stood waiting for the performers to come out after the show. So if you imagine standing on a nearby pavement looking up at this building, you can see that it's very large and imposing. It was designed by the architects Ernest Runce and Ford in a high-status architectural style, a mixture of neoclassical, Baroque and Italian Renaissance, and with a dome above with an angel blowing a trumpet on the top. And then on the inside, the auditorium was in 3 tiers with stalls, dress circle and upper circle, private boxes on either side, and a total seating capacity for 1,264 people. So it's in a busy area, as you can see, with pedestrians and transport constantly passing by. So the building itself would be a big advert for the productions taking place inside. And photos in later years show large lettering above the main entrance, advertising the current show, together with performers' names. It was an important social venue. People would get dressed up for a special night out. And articles appeared in the illustrated periodicals of the day, such as the Graphic, the Sphere, the Sketch, the Bystander, the Illustrated Sporting and Dramatic News, and the Stage. Photos of the building appeared on postcards. There were promotional postcards for shows, as well as posters, and sheet music covers of songs performed there. So if we look at a picture from 1903, the opening, this is from the Sketch, it's from the Graphic, and it was attended by King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra, up in the left-hand corner there, top left, giving the royal seal of approval. And you can see them along with sketches of the performers, the orchestra, and the theatre manager in the bottom right there. So the theme of this conference is From Ruins to Repair. So I'm sorry to say that after just over 35 years in operation, the Gaiety Theatre was closed in early 1939 and stood empty throughout the Second World War. The interior fittings were stripped out and sold, and the building suffered from structural damage in air raid bombing. There was a post-war attempt at renovation in the late 1940s, but the cost was just too high, and the building was finally demolished in the mid-1950s. So here we have some photos from the Sphere of 1957, showing the demolition partway through, and with the angel and the trumpet, known as the Spirit of Gaiety. She's over 20 feet high and made of teak, weighing more than a ton, being carefully lifted down from the dome, with a plan for her to be relocated to the central courtyard of a new building on the same site. And that new building opened in 1960. It was for the English Electric Company, and it was built in plain, modern Art Deco style, as you can see in the picture there. So I used to walk past this building a lot in the 1980s and early 90s when I was studying at King's College, and I remember that by that time it had a Citibank sign over the doorway. And the history of this building and of this site shows how often there's a complete demolition followed by a new building. And bearing in mind that 1960 is only 60 years ago, you'd think that the good solid Art Deco building would still be there, but no. Amazingly, it in turn was demolished in 2005, 2006, and a hotel and residential building appeared in its place, opening in 2012, and its rather uninspiring name is the ME London Hotel. And so you can see that on the far right here. And that new building does at least have 2 Theatreland plaques on it commemorating the Gaiety Theater, which stood there from 1903 until 1957. And on another happy note, the Spirit of Gaiety angel has survived. She's been beautifully restored and is on display in the V&A. But just a topical point to mention, experts have been warning recently against constant demolition and rebuilding, as it makes such a big contribution to climate change and global warming. And that damage to the environment comes in addition to the already important fact that we lose so much of our valuable heritage when an old building is torn down. So just a couple of questions to end with. I wonder if you've heard about demolition and rebuilding contributing to global warming. I don't think it's had a lot of coverage in the media. Or perhaps you have a favourite building which has either been lost or is in danger of demolition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you. So please ask any questions in the chat. We've already had a few come in actually, so we can return to those later. Thank you so much for people already asking questions. And our next speaker today is going to be Alice. So thank you very much, Jill. Alice, if you're able to pop your camera and your mic on, it'll be over to you.
Hi everyone. Are you ready? Yeah. This photograph depicts the hilltop settlement of Monte Cassino, 80 miles southeast of Rome. The crumbling walls, the scorched trees, the rubble and the ashes. This photograph was taken in the aftermath of the Battle of Monte Cassino, a series of assaults from the 17th of January to the 18th of May 1944 between the Allies and the Axis forces in World War II. An estimated 75,000 soldiers and 2,000 civilians were killed during the months of fighting. On the 3rd of September 1943, the previous year, Italy signed an armistice with the Allies. Germany and the Axis powers quickly responded by attacking and imprisoning Italian forces, freeing Mussolini and establishing a puppet state in Italy. 6 days later, on the 9th of September 1943, the Allies landed near the port of Salerno, starting the Allied invasion of Italy. The Axis forces created the Winter Line, a series of defensive lines across central Italy designed to prevent the Allies from reaching Rome. This tactic slowed the Allies down considerably between December 1943 and June 1944. Monte Cassino lay on the Gustav Line, which is the red line on this map. The Anglo-American forces travelled very slowly north as the mountainous landscape provided German forces ideal hilltop positions from which to observe an attack. Finally reaching the Gustav Line, Lieutenant Harold Bond of the Texan Division wrote of Monte Cassino, "Like a lion it crouched, dominating all approaches, watching every move made by the armies down below." Monte Cassino Abbey was founded in 529 AD by Saint Benedict. Benedict of Nursia had left Rome due to his displeasure with the immorality of the society. The abbey, which you can see poking up behind the walls of the left-hand side of this image, was the original house of the Benedictine order, founded as his refuge from the degradations of society. Benedict wrote the Rule of St. Benedict, a book of commandments, early in the 6th century, and these precepts governed life in the monastery. The motto of the monks was, and still is, ora et labora et lege, pray and labour and read. The abbey at Monte Cassino became an invaluable and incredibly rich centre of culture, worship and study. By the 1940s, the library contained over 40,000 books, illuminated manuscripts and vellum scrolls. At the start of the war, many other cultural treasures had been sent to the abbey for safekeeping, including the Neapolitan royal collection of coins and medals, and locks of hair and treasures associated with the poet Keats. February 1944. A month into the Battle of Monte Cassino, and Allied officers were becoming fixated with the idea that the abbey was being used as a German artillery observation point. It was not known whether the German troops did in fact use the abbey, but nevertheless the Allied officers remained paranoid. On February the 15th, 1944, 1,150 tons of explosives and bombs were dropped on the settlement. The aerial image on the right here, taken by an RAF officer, demonstrates the profound destruction of Monte Cassino. As a matter of fact, the Germans had an agreement with the Vatican to not occupy the abbey. After the Allied destruction of the abbey, in which no German troops but instead 230 Italian civilians were estimated to have been killed, the German 1st Parachute Division occupied the ruins of the abbey, creating a larger problem for the Allied forces. Thankfully, in November 1943, the previous year, 2 German officers, Becker and Schlegel, had seen to the evacuation of the valuable cultural items within the abbey. The abbot had initially resisted, sure that the Allies would not attack the abbey, but was eventually persuaded, seeking diplomatic help from the Vatican to ensure the treasures were not taken for the personal use of the Nazi officers. This photograph, the dark figure of the mourning monk, contrasted with the brightness of the rubble, his head bowed, face away from the camera, is haunting. This destruction is even more symbolic for this figure. We are confronted with what has been lost. At first glance, this photograph brought Orson Welles' 1941 film Citizen Kane to my mind. Kane's mansion, Xanadu, is a similarly elaborate building on the top of a hill, above which overhangs, like Monte Cassino, an air of decay, of destroyed and eroded ambition. War transformed Monte Cassino from existing in the present moment, a display of immutable power, to existing as a reminder of past conflict. No longer able to fulfill its purpose as a symbol of strength, it is instead testament to the immense human capacity for destruction. As striking as the crumbling ruins are the charred yet still standing trees. The warped, contorting remains eerily recall the increasingly frequent images of forest fire destruction that proliferate in the 21st century. This photograph is a haunting memento mori, an unsettling reminder of how easy it is for conflict and war to destroy incredibly valuable cultural monuments, to materially erase the past. However, there is also something to be said for the cyclicality and transience of every moment in history. The abbey, originally occupied by St. Benedict, had been previously destroyed in 577 by the Lombards, then by the Saracens in 887, and even naturally damaged by an earthquake in 1349. The process of rebuilding, renewal, and restoration is a constant cycle. After the war, and as it had been before, Monte Cassino was rebuilt from the rubble and the ashes. There is a fascinating silent film held by British Pathé and available to watch online of monks starting to rebuild the settlement from the ruins in 1946. Today, there are currently 13 monks living in the abbey, and it is a popular tourist destination. Whilst Monte Cassino stands as impressive as it ever has been, it remains of vital importance to see the images of it as it lay in ruins. The process of rebuilding is healing, but this must not be at the expense of forgetting the history of war and man-made destruction. Photographs, like these held at the Courtauld, are visceral reminders of a history that must not be lost.
Thank you very much, Alice. Fantastic. I can see that we've already had a lot of questions coming through and comments as well. We've got some really brilliant people in the audience today that I would love to ask questions to myself. So please keep adding to the chat. Let me see. Who is our next speaker? So our next speaker this evening is Christopher Williams. So Christopher is a retired civil servant and he lives in West London, sings in amateur choirs and volunteers for several projects. He started volunteering with the Courtauld in summer 2020. So over to you, Chris.
Good evening. It was a hazy afternoon in 1936 London when photographer Anthony Kirsting stood on the top of the newly completed Shellmex building, pointed his camera across the river to the south bank, pressed the shutter, and captured this image. If you were standing on the same spot today, you'd certainly recognize some of the features that he captured, while other structures have disappeared completely. On the right, we can see Hungerford Bridge carrying the railway into Charing Cross, as it still does. The tip of Cleopatra's Needle on the embankment is just visible at the bottom right-hand corner. In the middle distance, Waterloo Station, with its stone facade and glass platform canopies, is visible, as is the dome just about of what is now the Imperial War Museum. However, on the left, where we'd expect to see Waterloo Bridge, there is only a construction site. London County Council had decided to demolish the early 1800s structure of the original Waterloo Bridge after scour from the River Thames had damaged its foundations, and by the 1920s, short-term fixes had included a temporary steel framework to carry southbound vehicles, and I think we can make out some remnants of it in Kirsting's photograph on the left. The completion of the wholly new Waterloo Bridge, designed by Sir Giles Gilbert Scott, was delayed by the outbreak of World War II. It was officially opened in September 1942, and it has sometimes been referred to as the Ladies' Bridge, as a tribute to the mostly female wartime labour force that worked on it. But look, I'm dodging around the visual elephant in the room. What is that vertical structure dominating the vista? If we zoom in on the signage at its base, this shows that it is in fact a lead shot tower belonging to Walker's, Parker and Company Lead and Shot Works. If you look to the right, the adjacent property advertises Bell's Asbestos Works in nearby Southwark, a present-day environmental nightmare for such central London locations. But back to the shot tower. Built originally in the 1820s and operated as such until as late as 1949, it was the only building on this stretch of the waterfront between the bridges that was retained for the 1951 Festival of Britain. Hugh Casson, later Sir Hugh Casson, Director of Architecture for the festival, later described the shot tower before work on the festival site had begun, in the following words. It is an extraordinary device, with a staircase inside it. and you take hot lead up to the top and you drop it down. And the drops, they're absolutely perfect globes. They're absolutely wee, like the shot you get inside a cartridge. And there were these two old men, one at the top with the hot lead, and he dropped it down into a cold bucket at the bottom, and it cooled off at once, and then it was taken away and sold. And these two old boys were rather like two old fishermen in a boat. They'd been there for years. And they didn't speak. Most of the time they were separated by 150 foot of shaft. Casson not only retained the tower on the festival site, a gallery chamber at the top was replaced by a steel-framed superstructure and supported a radio beacon that allowed festival visitors to press a button and bounce a signal off the moon. Thus the tower, in its later years, could claim to have played its part at the dawn of the space age. It's also noticeable that it was depicted in its early days in two iconic works by Constable and by Turner. In the case of Constable, it's a truly remarkable presence, as he appears to show the shot tower on the western side of the bridge in his very specifically titled The Opening of Waterloo Bridge, Whitehall Stairs, June the 18th, 1817. The problem is, the tower wasn't built until 1826, years later. Turner, however, avoided any such titular time trap in his depiction of the Thames above Waterloo Bridge, with the tower and bridge just discernible amongst Turner's typical swirls of smoke and cloud enfolding the scene. But to conclude the shot tower story, the 1951 festival had been conceived to celebrate Britain emerging from wartime ruins. The tower that had survived to stand alongside the festival hall was eventually demolished in the early 1960s to make way for what is now the Queen Elizabeth Hall. But a near neighbour that features on Kirsting's waterfront does survive. Can you spot the lion on the parapet of the Lion Brewery? The brewery itself was later demolished to make way for the festival hall, but the lion was removed, revealing the initials of sculptor William Frederick Woodington and the date 24th May 1837 under one of its paws. The statue is made of Coed stone, which is an artificial material produced, again on the South Bank, in a manufactory run by the redoubtable Eleanor Coed, a successful businesswoman whose 200th anniversary of death is actually this month. The lion, having escaped the brewery's demolition, was then mounted beside a Festival of Britain entrance near Waterloo Station and painted red, referencing the symbol of the newly nationalised British Railways. He was moved again in 1966, the red paint removed, and installed in his current location on Westminster Bridge beside County Hall. His plinth bears the inscription, "The South Bank Lion." He's a real survivor from Kirsting's photograph, and to bring things full circle, the Shellmex building where Kirsting stood in 1936 appears in the bottom right-hand corner of my 2021 photograph of the lion, now occupying his prominent place in the arts, entertainment and cultural complex that is London's South Bank today. Truly a site of ruin, repair and renewal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Thank you. I can see that we've had some more questions coming in, and we will get to them after we've heard from all of our speakers. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen very briefly to set up the video for our next storyteller. So do bear with me. Okay. So our next speaker is Dora Williams. Dora is a visual artist and she holds a master's in fine art from the University of Gloucestershire. She's been volunteering for the Digitisation project since 2019. And she has created a video to accompany her story. So I'm just going to bring that up now. So Dora, over to you.
Thank you, Fran, and hello, everyone. So we can start. Like jewels sitting in a treasure chest, the Conway collection's photographs sit in the red boxes. The photographs are a springboard to new narratives as we see them in a new contemporary context. Searching through the boxes, I found several striking photographs of Lake Van, East Armenia, now Turkey. Van has often been called the Pearl of the East because of the beauty of its surroundings. It is also one of the oldest sites of Armenian culture, full of ancient artifacts, medieval manuscripts, and historic architecture. In this photo, we see Van Castle. Positioned on the hill, it overlooks the shores and the blue saline waters of Lake Van. Far in the distance, we can see imposing high mountains. Parts of the fortress are as old as 9th century BC, and through history, it has been the home to several conquerors, most recent, the Ottomans and Russians. In a derelict state, the arch on the left catches our eye and like a door invites us to step over into the world beyond its walls. The fragility of this arch is a connection to the artwork of Armenian artist Arshil Gorky. Gorky was born on Lake Van in a village called Korkum, now under the Turkish name Delkaya. As a boy, Gorky escaped the Armenian genocide in 1915. He told his story through paintings and founded that language through abstraction. Gorky's real name was Vozdanig Manug Adayan. He kept secret his past and invented a new history for himself. In 1924, changed his name to Arshil Gorky, pretending to be the nephew to the exiled Soviet poet Maxim Gorky. Since the late 19th century, a power struggle between the Ottomans and Christian Armenians led to a situation where Armenian men were forced to enroll in the army to fight rebellious fellow Armenians. This started a mass migration. Among those migrating was Gorky's father, who left his family behind in 1908 and sought asylum in the United States. During the years of separation, he rarely got in touch with his family and in fact never saw his wife again. This photo was taken in 1912. It shows a young Gorky standing awkwardly beside his mother, who wears a red scarf in a long floral dress. Gorky's mother sent the photo to her husband in America, but never received a response. Around Gorky's family, the Armenian genocide was escalating, and 7 years later, at 39, his mother died of starvation. She was buried in a mass grave. Arshil and his surviving sister Bartush ventured on a difficult journey across Turkey and Greece, where they embarked on the liner SS President Wilson bound for the United States. They were safely reunited in 1920 with their father, and Gorky later reclaimed his photograph, using it for a painting called The Artist and His Mother. The sorrow and melancholy of this masterpiece not only depicts a lost and idolized mother, but also reflects the tragedy of their situation and the horrors of the genocide they were experiencing. Gorky loved to recite tales of Armenia's past, and his love for Coptic and Armenian folk art. The titles of his painting are often a recollection of his homeland and show the nostalgia of his heritage. The painting titled The Plough and the Song is evocative of the Armenian ploughs that are traditionally built with the branch of a tree, and of the song the men sang in the fields. The following quote from one of his letters of 1944 gives us the essence of this nostalgia. You cannot imagine the fertility of forms that leap from our Armenian plough, and the songs, our ancient songs of the Armenian people, our suffering people, so many shapes, and ideas, happily a secret treasure to which have been entrusted the key. In this painting, delicate contour lines define shapes like flowers in the plough. Other shapes are semi-recognizable, like a living organism. They all are within an impalpable land. Its memories are scattered on the canvas. The familiar forms, as well as the unrecognizable ones, are all suspended in a world of emotional recollection. We can perceive the plough and the song as a still life, a landscape, and an illusion. Gorky's abstract work is an expression of displacement and trauma. Like the ruins of Van, Gorky's abstraction is fragmented and dismembered, alluding to vulnerability and fragility. Whilst time and the forces of nature have contributed to the decay of these Armenian buildings, the major cause for their destruction has been the hands of man who wants to obliterate them, as the ruins remain guilty reminders. There is plenty of evidence of Turkey's efforts to destroy Armenian history and relics, such as churches and crossstones called kachkars. The destruction has become so critical that UNESCO in 2010 listed the kachkars as intangible cultural heritage. Ashil Gorky's work functions to repair the damage and the destruction of the Armenian culture, and he has become an icon. Gorky has helped to inspire Armenian descendants to connect with their cultural history and renew Armenian heritage. Gorky's life became the subject of the award-winning film Ararat, written and directed by Atom Egoyan in 2002. Official protests from Turkish government and attempts from Turkish groups abroad to stop the screening of the film demonstrate a state in denial and remains uncomfortable with this past and these minority groups. The Armenian descendants are driving the renewal of their heritage. For example, Armenian communities from all over the world are building churches based on architectural templates of historic Armenian churches. For the Armenian communities, the trauma of the genocide continues to drive the commitment to preserve their cultural identity and heritage, not just to survive, but to connect, to understand, and to heal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dora. Thank you. I'll just stop sharing my screen now. And if we can have a sort of virtual round of applause for our 4 storytellers this evening. Please do continue to leave your comments in the chat. We will move on to a Q&A and be able to respond to some of the comments that you've been leaving. So thank you so much for those. But before we do that, we wanted to share a film that has been made by Digitisation volunteers for the project. We'll just set it up now.
I am Irma del Monte. I am an architectural historian from Venice. I've been volunteering at the Courtauld Institute of Art for 1 year. I was really surprised when I found a picture of 100 years ago of a library where I used to study when I was in high school. What struck me in the picture was, rather than the architecture, that of course is really nice, was the intimate ambience. It showed me such an insightful atmosphere of a city that nowadays you can no longer see.
So the film that we just watched, that featured Irma Del Monte. She's an architectural historian from Venice who started volunteering with the Digitisation project in 2018. And the film was created by Amy Hill, Ed Coughlin, Irma Del Monte, Luke Walker, Massimo Bonini, and Ray Morris Hill. And the music was composed by Luke Walker as well. We wanted to show that today because we really felt like it fitted with the theme of kind of ruin, repair, renewal, sort of revisiting places and looking at them anew. what I'd love us to do is just invite a round of applause virtually again. Thank you so much for joining us. This talk has been recorded, so if you do want to share it with anybody, please do so. So just massive thank you to our speakers and for sharing their stories. After the event today, you will get an email with the link for watching this again. We'll include a survey as well, and also some links to our blog, our Twitter and Instagram if you want to explore some of these photographs further. So thank you very much to our storytellers. If you want to unmute and say goodbye, storytellers, you can do that now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank
And
you.
huge thank you to Fran and our storytellers. It's been so wonderful, and thank you all to everyone for coming along and asking such great questions.